Hi there, this is Love Johar. Thank you so much for tuning into this channel and thank you so much for tuning into this video. Today, I will discuss in this video about the important steps to handle a data breach according to GDPR. Okay, what do you have to do when personal data is breached? Who do you have to inform? Who does what? Roles and responsibilities. How should a personal data breach be handled? All these things will be discussed in this video. Please watch carefully, and as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the comment section. Understanding how to handle a data breach according to GDPR is very important because in today's world, data breaches are reality. Okay, so we do come across data breaches on a day to day basis, but the problem is we do not want them to happen. But the issue is they do happen. Okay, that's why we are discussing in this video how to make sure that we handle a data breach properly. Okay, and especially in the case of GDPR, where it involves personal data of EU citizens, EU residents, because it comes under the jurisdiction of EU GDPR. Okay, so it means that it needs to be notified to the data protection authority about any sort of personal data breach within 72 hours of finding the breach. Okay, so if you come to know that there is a data breach, you have to inform to the respective data protection authority about the data breach in your organization. Okay, so according to GDPR, there are associated fines and reputational damages as well associated with the personal data breaches. So it is very important now, it is imperative that we understand who does what when personal data is breached, what is the roles and responsibility. So security incident management team, the responsibility of the incident management team who is handling the incident, who is being informed about the incident, should first of all inform the data protection officer. That is their role. Now the data protection officer of the controller should notify the data protection authority when the risk to the rights and freedoms of the data subjects is high. Okay, so data protection officer has to notify when the data protection officer has the understanding that the data which has been breached is of relatively high importance and personal data of the data subjects. Okay, the DPO of the controller may also notify the data subjects as well if the sensitivity of the personal data is very high in this case. Okay, but this should be done in accordance with the public relations PR team of the organization as well. Okay, so three roles we have already discussed: role of data protection officer, role of PR team, and role of security incident management team. Okay, again, one important role of data protection officer in this case, the data protection officer of the processor must notify the controller as well. Okay, and all data breaches need to be reported to the controller without exception. So data protection officer has to ensure that the controller needs to be informed of any sort of data breaches related to GDPR, related to personal data. So now coming to a part where we understand how should a personal data breach be handled. Okay, so first of all, as soon as personal data breach is identified, the first and foremost task should be to inform the data protection officer in your organization. You should involve him, you should make him aware that there has been an incident which has been identified as personal data breach. Okay. After that, you need to assess the scope and impact. You need to identify the extent of the impact and the scope of the personal data breach. What all has it affected? Okay. How many number of data subjects, whose personal data is breached? What is the number? What is the count? Then you have to determine possible types of personal data that were breached. What sort of personal data was it that was breached? Okay. And what sort of security measures were already there? you know you have to identify all these things first of all when you assess the scope and impact, and accordingly you have to report to the respective authorities in the 72 hours. And this step should be a high priority and should focus on providing sufficient information to the data protection officer for this notification to the data protection authority. Okay, so the DPO should have sufficient information before informing this breach to the data protection authority as well. Okay, now after that, when, as I already discussed, if the data sensitivity is very high, then you might have to inform to the relevant parties as well, data subjects as well. So DPO of your organization should inform the data protection authority if your organization is the controller of personal data, first of all, and if the risk to the rights and freedom of data subjects is very high, the data subject should also be informed by the DPO of the controller. Okay. However, if organization is the processor of personal data, the DPO should notify the responsible person stated in your contract with the controller. Okay. So one important thing which I have just mentioned now, if your organization is the processor of personal data, then in that case the DPO of your organization should notify the responsible person stated in your contract with the controller. Okay, hope it makes sense. The communication should include contract details of the DPO, details of the breach, likely impact, actions which are already in place, and those being initiated to minimize the impact of the data breach. All these should be noted down. Also, it is important to mention the further impact is being investigated as if now. Okay, if you want to notify it, and necessary actions are being taken to mitigate the impact. Okay, all these needs to be mentioned. So now, while the DPO is notifying the relevant authorities, it is critical that the incident team continues to understand two things in parallel. First of all, taking all the possible measures to reduce the impact and contain further unauthorized access related to the data breach which has already happened. Second thing, continuing to refine the original estimate of the number of data subjects breached. You have to understand that how much sensitive data has been breached, and the type of personal data that was breached. So two things are happening now in this stage. One thing is containment of all the uh, data breach which has happened. You have to contain it. You have to make sure that there is no further unauthorized access. One is containment and isolation of the affected domain or whatever has affected, whatever services have been affected. Second thing is to identify how many data subjects have been affected and what type of personal data has been breached. So two things happen in parallel now in this case. So accordingly, you update the data protection officer on the updates on both of them. Okay. So if the freedom and rights of the data subjects are significantly impacted, as I already mentioned, the sensitivity of the personal data is very high. So accordingly, the data protection officer of the controller would need to decide if the data subjects also need to be informed. Okay. So that decision then has to be made. And accordingly, if you want to inform the data subjects as well, then you need to inform the public relations team or your communications team of your organization should be involved in this communication process. Okay. Now, last but not the least, I would say review and monitor. Once the personal data breach has been contained, the organization should conduct a thorough review of what all existing measures were in place and explore the possible ways in which these measures can be strengthened to prevent a similar breach from happening again. Okay. All such identified measures should be monitored to ensure that the measures are satisfactorily implemented. Okay. So that there is no further data breach recurrence. Okay. And you should keep a data breach register as well, so that you keep a log of what all actions have been taken in a data breach. You document all these. Okay. Because data breaches have significant impact nowadays. You can have financial consequences, you can have reputational damage, so personal data breaches have to be managed very carefully. You should not wait for a data breach to happen if you do not have seen any data breach so far, but instead you should start preparing for it, and you should have a proper personal data breach process in place, and you should have appropriate roles and responsibilities defined, and all the documentation in place so that you can handle a data breach in case when it happens. Okay. So I hope this video makes sense to you, and as always, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to ask in the comment section. Thank you.